All right, before we start modeling, let's just make a quick sketch of the object that we're going to produce. It's going to be a rectangular sheet metal box. So I'll just draw up a rough sketch of that here. Give the end. That'll be the sides. Okay, so let's give it some dimensions. The longest dimension of the box, we're going to make 300 millimeters. The width of the box is going to be 150 millimeters, and the height of the box is going to be 100 millimeters. Now, obviously that's not to scale. One other thing is the box will actually have a lid. So let's sketch that in. The lid will be the same height, the same length and width as the box. Like that. And it will have a height of, let's say, 35 millimeters. All right, so do a quick sketch of that on a bit of paper or just take a screenshot so you know what the sizes are and what the box is going to look like when we are in Onshape. Here we are in the Onshape workspace. Let's have a quick look around. You've got tools up the top. Now the exact tools that are displayed will change depending on what you're doing. We have the workspace here, which is where you'll build your models. And over on the left we have this browser which will contain all of the steps that you've completed, the processes you've completed, as well as a list of your parts. Now, these three blue square sort of shapes that are floating in the middle of the workspace just represent the planes that you can work on. The front plane, the top plane, and the right plane. They're not physical objects, they're just like a transparent little surface to indicate the different views, and we can turn those off later if we need to, turn off the visibility of them over in the browser here by clicking the little eyeballs. We'll leave them there for the moment. The first thing we're going to do is create a sketch. Now a sketch is just a two-dimensional drawing. So to do that I click the sketch button in the top left, and the first thing it asks me to do is select a plane. Where do I want to sketch? It says select a sketch plane. Now we only have these three planes at the moment, so we're going to choose one on which to draw our sketch, and I'll use the top plane. So I'll click that with the left mouse button. Now you can see this new blue rectangle has been added to indicate that that is the plane that we're going to be sketching on. To make the next step easier, I want to look at that straight down from on top. So on my little view cube over here, I can click top, and that will rotate the view to the top. Now let's clean up this view a little bit. I'm going to turn off those planes now. I'll hide them. So I'm hiding the right, the front, the top plane, and the origin. We don't actually need that anymore either. Right, let's draw a rectangle. I'm using the corner rectangle here. So I'm going to click the corner rectangle. I'll click once here, drag out. I'm not worried about the exact size, but you know, we're shooting for a rectangle that's about 300 by 150 millimeters. So get your numbers roughly close to that. Don't try and hit it exactly. That's not a good way to do it. Left click again. Now you can see I have these two dimensions. My left to right dimension's about 307, and my top to bottom measurement's about 144. You can see as I hover my mouse over those, I can edit them. So I'll edit this one here, 300, and hit enter. And now you can see the other one here is ready for me to edit, 150, enter. Alright, if you made a mistake with that and your dimensions aren't visible and you've already clicked, yours looks like this, we can easily add dimensions. With this tool right here, or by clicking D on the keyboard, you can then click a line or an edge or anything and enter your dimensions directly. So let's get that rectangle sorted out. 150 millimeters tall, 300 millimeters wide, and that's done. Let's click the green tick to finish the sketch. Right, now we have a two-dimensional rectangle floating in space. It has no thickness, just has length and width. We need to turn that now into a piece of sheet metal. So let's do that. Let's use the sheet metal tool up here. So you can see in this little drop down box we've got a whole range of tools related to working with sheet metal. The first thing we have to do is create a sheet metal model. So I'll click that. There are a few different ways you can create a sheet metal model, working from a solid object or working from a sketch. Since we're working from a sketch, we have to use this option here called thicken. So I'll select the thicken command. Now let's look at what's blue in the box. It's saying faces or sketch regions to thicken. That's what we have to select. So let's select our sketch region, which is this that we've just created. Now that's turning that into a piece of sheet metal. We have to enter the thickness. I've already got that here, 0.7 millimeters, because that's the metal we have in the workshop at the moment. And the bend radius of 1.5 millimeters is about right for our magna bend. So let's enter those if they're not already there for you. And you can click the green tick to finish that. And now if we zoom in, we can see that that is a solid object now. It's not just a two-dimensional rectangle, it has some thickness, 0.7 millimeters of thickness. Alright, so that's a nice looking piece of sheet metal, but it's not a toolbox. So let's add some sides. Let's add a front and a back to our toolbox. So in the toolbox commands here, we need to choose flange, and this little tool opens up and it's saying edges or side faces to flange. So we have to tell the tool which edges we want to add a flange to. So I'm going to be adding them here and here. Alright, and there we go. So we are going to tell the program how tall we want those flanges to be. At the moment the default is 25 millimeters, but I want these to be 90 millimeters, so I'm going to enter that. Now this little option here, flange alignment, you can have inner, outer or middle. Let me show you what that does. So if I zoom in on the part here so that we can see it a bit more clearly, if I change from inner to outer, watch what happens to the vertical flanges we've just created. So I'm changing from inner to outer. See how it moved in very slightly? That's to do with the dimensions that we created in our sketch. If it's set to inner, that 150 millimeter width is inside these sheet metal walls. But if we set it to outer, the 150 millimeter dimension will be outside those walls. So it depends whether you want that dimension to be the inside or the outside of the box. I'm going to set it to outer. Alright, so we can click the green tick to finish that flange operation. And there we go. That's looking pretty good. It's looking a lot more like a box, but we need more flanges. So, flange again, and I'm now going to create the little tabs that we'll use to spot weld the ends of the toolbox into the body of the toolbox. And there we go. We want them on that end, and I'll do the same thing on the other end. We can do them all at the same time. Those are too wide though. I'm going to change that to 15 millimeters. And there we go. I'll change this to outer as well, so that our toolbox is the size we set. And there we go. So that flange is done. Let's add some more flanges. Going to be a lot of flanges today. So flange again, and I'm going to stick some on these top edges to fold them inwards, but that's way too far. We want 10 millimeter flanges there. Change that back to outer, and green tick again. So there's two more flanges. Now that would be alright for a toolbox. That would be strong, but I don't really like rubbing my hand on that sheet metal edge every time I grab a spanner, so let's add some more flanges. So I'll click here and here, and that's bending that down to create a little 90-degree return. So again, I'll change that to 10 millimeters. Yeah, I'm going to change that to outer. Doesn't really matter for this part of the project, but there we go. So I'll click the green tick again, and that part of the toolbox, that piece of sheet metal, is now basically finished. If we want to have a look what that would look like folded out flat, you can click this little button here to see the flat panel view or the flat layout. And here it is. you can see it's got all the little cutouts, it's got the bend lines shown, and if you zoom in here you can see there's even these little relief notches. So it's pretty nice, pretty handy way to design a sheet metal part. And to close that flat panel view, flat pattern view it is, I'll click this button. Alright, that's good. We're ready to make another part now, but before we do, a really good habit to get into is to name the steps that you have done. Because if we want to go back and edit something later, let's say we wanted this top flange here to be a little bit wider than 10 millimeters. If we weren't happy with that, we can look over here in our list of things. We've got our first sketch, we've got our sheet metal model, and all those flanges. But sometimes it can be difficult to find the actual flange that you want to edit. I've only got 4, and so let's find it. It's not that one, that's the sides. It's not those ends, must be this one. Okay, flange 3. Let's say I wanted to edit that, and I wanted for some reason for this to be 15 millimeters. There we go. So that's made the top of that wider now. So that's how you do it. That was flange 3. I don't actually want to do that, so I'm going to undo. Control Z is undo, by the way, as with most programs. But it'd be handy if that flange had a name. So I'm going to rename it. Right click, rename, and I'm going to call that base body. So that's what I'm calling this piece of sheet metal, is the base. It's the body of the base of the toolbox, and I'm going to call this the top edge flange. Now I'm going to go through and give all of these other operations sensible names. Let's start with the sketch. I'm going to call this the base body sketch. We'll rename the sheet metal model. Rename the first flange. These tabs on the end, I might call those the base body weld tabs. Oh, I've got a capital there, but that's alright. Let's go for the last flange. What are we going to call that? Base body top edge return. Doesn't really matter what you call them as long as it makes sense to you. Okay, so that part is looking pretty sweet, and we should name the part itself down in this little parts list here. And I'm calling that the base body. Hope the names will make sense when we start adding some more parts. Right, time for some end panels.